This is turn 13, and the invasion of Marignan continues. Marignan has sent out a cry for help in the messages, in addition to his existing cry for help in the thread. Because I've already finished some enchantment research, I'm able to create Revenants, and because they cost significantly fewer death gems than any of my national mages, they're the most efficient research option that I have. Here in Bogaton, my pirates meet a bunch of province defense and die. It's possible that Marignan is building a fort here, and that's why he increased the PD. It's also possible that the PD went up from an event, or it's possible that Marignan just felt paranoid and decided to invest the money to defend the province. Oh, and of course it's also possible for him to have scouted these pirates and figured out the fact that they could sail and that he needs to defend the province that they don't immediately border. Unfortunately, the pirates are out right away, so they never even get a chance to enter combat. But even if they were able to fight, they're not particularly impressive. They have no shields, no helmets, only a ringmail cuirass. And while their falchions are pretty strong, they're not necessarily better than even the generic heavy infantry that's defending this province. So they lose that. Here in Borel, we're able to take a province easily. This is the farm province, which I was converging on, and as you can see, I've got my frontliners here and my blob of crossbows in skirmish mode, and the province defense here, well, it does include a couple crossbows, routes immediately. This has to do with the fact that the Indy commander was sitting in the archers right over there, and because my crossbows were set to fire archers, they fire on him right away and land a lucky shot, which wins me the battle without even taking a scratch. Here in the Endless Caverns, Marignan retakes this province. This is a force sent out from their cap circle, or from their capital rather, because this province is in their cap circle. So he's using these Royal Guards, which in my opinion is the correct unit for Marignan to use as a frontliner, because while they are more expensive than regular infantry, they're the only real unit that Marignan has that has enough protection in order to actually take on crossbow fire and still come out okay. Their attack and defense is actually at a better than human 12, based on, just the generic 10, but here in the cave they have -3, so it's not going to look quite as good. And their morale and hit points are also much better than the human standard. Their greatsword deals enough damage that it's going to hurt even against heavy plate mail, and while their offensive power isn't necessarily special against Lemuria, they are tanky enough to be able to survive a spear hit, and more importantly, tanky enough to be able to survive crossbow fire as well. Marignan is using a line formation with crossbows. If you've seen my equipped series, you'll know why I consider this to be a poor idea. Basically, archers all like to fire at the same squad, which means that you want them to be relatively close to their target in order to basically be able to continue shooting accurately at it. Line formation spreads out the guys at the end so that they're further away, so their shots are going to be less precise. Additionally, the line formation doesn't necessarily make your guys any less clustered than a skirmish formation would, and skirmish formation averages to bringing your guys a little bit closer to the target that they want to shoot at. So if you want to spread your guys out, I like skirmish formation more, and line formation actually still even keeps guys in some adjacent squares. Marignan is using his Royal Navigator as a leader. That's probably just because he didn't have any commanders on hand. Because Royal Navigators have 40 leadership, it's often worth recruiting, or it's worth using them as leaders if you just have them on hand. These are Marignan's Cat Mages, Astral Air Water guys, and yeah. My Centaurian doesn't actually manage to kill anyone, although he does land a hit on this guy. Because he's ethereal and tanky, it takes him a little while to go down, but not nearly long enough for his Fear Aura to actually rout anyone. It looks like he did manage to kill one, so good job. Here we see Mictlan continuing to expand. We've already seen his Bless, so not much to see here. I'm just going to check out his formation real quick. Oh yeah, we've already seen this. Okay, so he's got the Feathered Warriors with the Warrior here. This guy here, the Feathered Warrior, is a standard guy, which means he boosts the morale of the squad. The only inconvenient thing about using the Feathered Warriors is the fact that they have map move 1, which makes your armies quite a bit less mobile, because both the Warriors here and the Jaguar Warriors and the Commander here all have map move 2, so these guys make them a bit slower at getting around the map. But extra morale is nice, helps prevent routing, and here he brought more than enough to actually take that. Unexpected events, we have in Very Ill Omens, that's unfortunate, just get some misfortune, and we get some free pearls, so gems are nice. This misfortune thing is way up here. It's potentially bad if An indie event makes an attack happen here because I actually need to get through this province, but I'm not super concerned. I have already built the temple here, so now I'm building a lab, and then I'm going to start recruiting additional lizard shamans. Here I'm increasing the province defense to 12. This is basically to add additional frontline and additional archers in order to help fight in the swamp here. Up to, depending on the number of units that you're getting, up to around 20 or so, province defense is actually quite gold efficient if you know that you're going to fight there. I'm not going to bother recruiting any of these archers though, because I really want to be able to use crossbows instead. The fact that they're armor piercing just makes such a huge difference in LA when everything has fairly heavy armor. I have these guys set in the front just to fire, and they're basically intending to tank the Royal Guards, and then these guys are set to fire archers. And we actually saw here in Marignon's formation that his mage is set immediately behind his crossbows. So if these guys are trying to fire into this archer stack, or into this crossbow stack rather, they're relatively likely to hit this Royal Navigator as well with his very low protection and human hit points. So I stand a decent chance of actually sniping him out. Meanwhile, I'm upping the province defense here to 20. This is, as I mentioned, because this is a gold-efficient way of getting a large number of troops. This gives me an additional commander just in case both of my Centaurians somehow die from undead sniping, and it gives me a bunch of extra crossbows. So I'm going to be recruiting these crossbows as well. I'm only recruiting as many as I can get this turn, just in case I don't manage to take the province, because I see that Marignon has stacked up his guys right over here. And I'm clustering all of my guys here together. So essentially I'm expecting Marignon to attack into me here, and that's why I'm grouping up and increasing the province defense. This is a static move, so I'm basically playing defensively rather than proactively pursuing additional provinces from Marignon. And this does actually end up being a mistake, trying to turtle up on this province and actually hold it rather than fight for additional provinces from Marignon. But if Marignon does attack into me here, I'm actually quite well prepared for it. I have, in addition to the province defense here, which is going to be getting me additional crossbows and additional human heavy infantry, which is nice, I'm also going to have my own ghost front line here, as well as my meteorite guards. I'm using these guys who have only paralyze attacks as just a single undisciplined mass. The idea being that they're just going to filter in around this squad right over here. Because these guys are set in line formation, they're not going to be able to easily just go through it. So they're going to need to go around, so basically they're going to move forward a little bit more slowly. With undisciplined guys, you generally want to put them further back because you can't tell them to hold an attack or slow their movement with line formation. And I want them to hit at roughly the same time as my actual infantry engages, because the paralyzed attacks can actually be quite useful, and I want to basically use them to fill in the gap right over here. So that's why I have them set behind the infantry line so that they have to basically walk around it before they can actually enter combat. And because these guys are the 1 hit point guys, they're my most sacrificial units. So that's the plan here. Basically hope that Marignon attacks into me here, which would make sense, or which made some sense to me because I have I can see both of his armies here, so like he has them stacked up to both border this province, so it looks like he would want to capture it. And this is actually a very high value province, so it's a farm with very high population, which means it's worth a lot of money. This guy's just patrolling here because I do plan on building a fort at some point, as well as bringing in these additional crossbowmen, but I don't have the money to do that now. I am about to finish this fortress here, though, and then, yeah, this guy's going to move up over here to basically be able to provide additional buffs for my undead units. Unholy Protection increases the magic resistance for a single square, and Unholy Power increases the attack and AP of my undead, so they become faster and a little bit hardier. Over here, I'm not increasing the province defense just because Marignon doesn't really have anything that borders it. I'm basically just moving these guys up so that they can then either attack this province or group up with these guys, and helping to hold this province to basically make sure that these guys have a retreat path is also useful. Over here, I see that Marignon, or that Agartha, has moved up a couple iron corpses, and I see that he also has some crossbowmen and blind fighters here. So that's a little bit worrying, because it means that he could attack me basically along this border. As a result, I'm not going to site search this province quite yet. Instead, I'm going to move them into the wasteland. So what they're going to be doing here is basically just defending against a potential attack from these iron corpses. So these guys are set to hold and attack rear because I would much prefer them to be going around Agartha's army and attacking his mage. The primary benefit from the Winter Wolves is their chill aura. This is basically going to freeze guys around it, but the undead iron corpses are going to be immune to it. However, because the iron corpses are undead, they're also vulnerable to dust to dust. Because I just finished Thaumaturgy 1 last turn, mostly in order to enable Frighten, I now also enable Dust to Dust, which is going to wipe out a single square of those iron corpses, and it deals armor negating damage, so it's basically sure to get rid of them. So he's going to cast one Raised Skeletons cast, basically just in order to provide a couple extra guys while the iron corpses are still out of range, and then once the iron corpses run forward, he's going to dust them. These guys here, because they're ethereal, can help hold the iron corpses off, and because iron corpses have very low MR, they are actually susceptible to the paralyze attack from these guys. I should have actually split them up into multiple squads so that I have a slightly wider front, but that's not a huge deal. And the basic tactic doesn't really rely on them doing anything other than holding off the iron corpses for a few turns. So these guys are basically going to move here basically just to help hold this province in case Agartha is betraying me this turn, and even if he's not, Wastelands are more likely to have additional sites, so it's not really a waste of time to get to site search that one first. Over here I'm continuing to recruit my Lizard Shamans as I can afford them. But yeah, I'm not really able to afford, it looks like I'm not able to afford one this turn because I'm instead spending the money to pump up the province defense in these two provinces in order to fend off a potential attack from Marignan. I consider province defense traps to be one of the better ways of spending your gold if you actually guess correctly, just because you get such value out of your money. If you guess incorrectly, though, then they're worth much less than the troops that you would have gotten because you can't move them around. So this is 200 gold basically just stuck here, and that's not very good. 200 gold isn't a huge amount, but for Lemuria, with its trash income, thanks to the pop kill that it's getting, it actually really does matter. And I am, of course, building a lab here, so that's also taking some gold away. And I'm also continuing to recruit the indie crossbows, just in order to have something to, keep shooting. I mean, I've gone over the glories of indie crossbows before. They're really nice. But yeah, we're creating Revenants here in order to basically just get research, and they are very efficient for that, if nothing else. And then our research is continuing to go into enchantment because we want Horde of Skeletons and Rigor Mortis. Rigor Mortis being our first essentially battlefield clear spell, you could say, in that it's going to shut down enemy magery. This guy over here, Good Luck, is leading his remaining ghosts to go capture this province here, and that shouldn't be too difficult because he still has a fair number of those ghosts left. And Death Tongue, our prophet, is continuing to conjure apparitions. He's going to have enough apparitions next turn, and if he gets enough of these dispossessed spirits spawning, he'll be able to attack right away, and if not, he'll just conjure up a couple additional shadows. And that's the turn. This is turn 14 of Degeneracy, and I basically just wanted to check in with Mictlan and Joman and see what they're up to. So Mictlan basically says that he is not going to be attacking me soon, and he's also worried about the fact that because Mictlan is the nation with the widest blood access in this game, not counting Marignan maybe, he's worried that he's going to be targeted next if I am taken down by all of my neighbors. Joman sends a similar message, saying basically that he doesn't want to fight me, that he doesn't want to be diplomonstered into a war. This is also very good for me because it means that, I don't have to worry about them attacking me quite yet. Because I assume that Joman is just concerned that he's weak early on, and as a result he doesn't want to potentially set himself behind by taking unnecessary losses. My Pretender is able to find a magic site here. It's just a battlefield, so not particularly special. We get to see Mictlan fight again, and there's not much to say here aside from the fact that there's an Azure Initiate, but they don't cast anything particularly dangerous. Here we have some Renegade Undead, so that's no good. This is an event which can happen to any nation, but it happened to me, the Undead faction, and I get a Spectral Mage attack and a bunch of Long Dead. So we'll check out this battle. Whoops. We'll check out this battle here. And yeah, so you can see the Spectral Mage here. This is actually a summon that anyone can get, which is Death 1, and then has 2 random paths, which can be Death, Earth, Astral, and Water. People use these guys as a means of breaking into Earth, and in particular, getting the Earth and Astral cross paths. They're not super gem efficient, but many of them have very useful magic which can otherwise be fairly difficult to access. Earth and Astral, like I'd mentioned, is extremely useful for opening up access to Crystal Gear, and Earth 2, like this one has, can also cast some very useful battle magic because he can cast summon Earth power, and he can forge Earth boots, so they can be a good way of getting diversity. And in this case, as an indie, he's just, not going to cast anything particularly impressive. These Long Dead Horsemen deal a fair amount of damage just because of their light lance, so having a lance charge and very high AP means they can hit pretty hard. But Long Dead have very low magic resistance, so they're actually going to be taking damage from our spectral weapons, even if it is halved from their being pierce resistant. So they're essentially going to be like regular human cavalry. I shouldn't have too much trouble taking them down. And then these guys are similar story. Long Dead's primary advantage over humans is the fact that they have 0 encumbrance, and then their disadvantage is the fact that they have low HP, but with their low MR I don't expect to have too much trouble fighting them once I bring some actual, troops. The handful of ghosts that I had there were not nearly enough to actually hold the province. Here in the Mountains of Madness I take on that indie province without any trouble. I have my dispossessed spirits here at the front, just in order to take the brunt of the enemy crossbow fire and get into combat first. So they eat the lance hits from these guys, which means that my actual combat ghosts are relatively protected. The enemy crossbow fire actually damages some of their heavy cavalry. Because all of my ghosts have tower shields, they're relatively, or spectral shields rather, they're relatively well protected from crossbow fire. They are susceptible to the banishment from this priest, of course. Because the priest counts as a mage, I've mentioned this before, the heavy infantry are set to guard him by default, which means that he's not actually, or these guys are not actually engaging in combat until after the ghosts have already fought and routed the commander. So I take that province, even though I do lose a couple ghosts from the banishment and so on. I manage to finish my fortress, which is nice, and I get a hero. So Etumu here, the Wraith Lord, is really nice if, for whatever reason, you accidentally didn't take Death 3 on your Pretender, or if your Pretender died while expanding, or a similar travesty happens and you need Death 3 in order to summon your Grand Lemurs. Aside from that, he's just basically a Wraith King, or sorry, a Wraith Lord, the summon, except he also has holy levels. And of course he is mounted, so he has additional defense, and the additional mounted bonus to reduced defense reduction. So yeah, he's very strong even without any gear, because he's got these awesome stats and fairly high protection, and is ethereal. And even if stuff does go wrong, he's also immortal, he has very high fear. He's basically amazing. He's a thug in a can, and I'm going to use him to go take on these provinces right over here. So he'll need to recapture this province from the Long Dead, and this province is still indie, so he can potentially claim it just by being such an utter badass. My Pretender is going to move down here, start site searching in this direction. This commander is going to walk back here to pick up these crossbows, which I can now afford. And I'm back to being able to afford Lizard Shamans, of course, and I'm recruiting some from both of these provinces now. This guy's moving up here. He's going to spend a little bit of time collecting up spooks, but mostly he's just going to be able to be around in this area to potentially defend against Miklini's betrayal. And then he's also going to be able to move up over this way in case I need to reinforce against Marignon. Marignon has balled up into a giant death ball. This makes me even more convinced that he wants to attack this province, and so I'm going to move up my guys over here. So again, this is a static play, which is dangerous in that it has a strong chance of setting me behind. Similarly, I'm not advancing with these guys into this province, even though we have similar numbers of troops. If I believe the scouting report, I might even have slightly more. And because this is a cave, I would actually even have the advantage in the troop versus troop fight, because my undead have 100 dark vision, and his troops do not, so I would have the attack and defense advantage there. However, I'm scared of his pumping up the PD here, and I feel that I've already invested in the PD here, so I wait instead, which, again, not necessarily the cleverest move, because I should be feeling like I'm on a timer, because I need to kill Marignon here before people realize that I'm huge and start invading me. I just feel as though I have a much better chance of winning a battle, and I expect that the battle's actually going to come, so I continue to blob up on this province instead of actually continuing to attack. So, passive play, not very good. However, my army here is looking very impressive, which would be great if they actually do fight. And that's the turn. This is turn 15, and Marignon has not attacked me, so my passive play has not been paying off. We search for magic sites, but don't actually find any. We revive another Limmer Acolyte, basically just to have additional combat magic. I basically want to start preparing to be able to use Mage Support now that my enchantment is steadily going along. And my Death Gem income is looking very healthy right now. It's up to 19, so feeling good about that. I get a great event, which increases the province income by 20. This would be actually a much better event to have if the province were completely depopulated, because that province income is going to go down as the population recedes. Here I get no taxes from Lemuria, but that's okay because I have 0 income there anyways. Here in World Pillar I get a bunch of free stuff. This is great. I like free stuff. Stone Pillar lets me cast Astral Window. If I have free commanders, like, say, this guy right over here, who's moving crossbows around, or this guy right over here, who's going to be building a fort, or these mages, which are researching, then I could cast Astral Window, which is like getting a much better scouting report that's able to be cast from afar. And then because you generally use this on an indie scout or similar, you don't really need to worry about them being feeble-minded. Unfortunately, I don't really have very many spare commanders, so until I recruit a scout for it, say this guy over here, I'm not going to be, and then move him to a lab, then I'm not actually going to be able to get any advantage from that item. So I see that Marignon has continued to ball up into a death ball, and I again expect him to attack into me here, and I just kind of wait for it and recruit more crossbows. Because I see that he abandoned this province, I'm going to attack into that with my guys up here in Dampdale. So finally at least making some offensive move. And then here I'm going to continue expanding into the Indies. I've summoned up a couple extra Shadow Soldiers. I have enough Dispossessed Spirits in here so that they're at least a squad. And then here, the Wraith King is going to lead these guys up here. I'm just putting them all into a single undisciplined blob, basically just because I want to lose these guys. I don't really value them, and they cost me upkeep. And then these guys are just going to soak some hits. This guy's basically just going to cast Unholy Blessing just in order to get the minuscule additional magic resistance and death HP. So not a huge benefit from that. He's basically just kind of chilling there before he runs in. Unholy Power can potentially help him out, though. That's going to give him some extra speed and attack. And then once he's finished casting, he's going to run in and then go fight everyone all by himself. Not much more to say. We're still just doing the Raven Hunts for research, and we're still researching enchantment. And our site searching continues. And actually, there is something important here. And that is this thing right over here. So we see why Agartha had been building up all of his guys over here, or had been keeping these iron corpses over here, and that's because he was building a fort. So now that his fort is completed, we know that Agartha is finally going to attack. He's either going to attack Mary, or he's going to betray and attack us, because there is no other reason for him to have this giant army over here. At the time, I was still actually optimistic, and I believed that he was going to attack Marignon instead of me, mostly just based on the fact that he doesn't have guys over here. He just has like these 9 crossbows, which would be a little weird for him to have if he were planning on invading me with them. I'm moving these guys over here. They're just continuing to site search. I should have honestly had them both move, basically in order to make sure that they both showed up in case he does attack with these 9 crossbowmen into this province. But like I'd mentioned, I actually did take Marignon at his word still and think that he was going to help me invade Marignon instead of attack me. And I've got additional reinforcements moving up here, but aside from that, a very static turn. I've just been wasting my time with this army right over here instead of actually using it to fight Marignon. This is turn 16, and Agartha has continued to stall. In the Endless Caverns, I am defeated soundly by Marignon's entire army, because he moves everyone up into here. because this is a cave, there's some darkness issues, but the cavemen don't particularly suffer from it all too much. And he's not really casting much of value. These guys are just kind of air shielding it up, keeping themselves safe. They have gems, and they're using them to summon lesser air elementals. So lesser air elementals are size 3 tramplers. They're very unimpressive, particularly against Lemuria's stuff, because my guys all have magic weapons. Their lightning attack, at least, is an armor negating magic weapon, but because my guys have 0 prot, they don't really care about the fact that it's armor negating. But he is actually also casting solar rays, and that is a dangerous spell that can potentially nuke my undead. The air elementals are just kind of still doing their trampling thing. They're not proving particularly valuable, but he just has such a huge number of additional troops that his crossbow fire is able to utterly wreck me. And then he has these fire elementals. So these guys are very, very threatening, in spite of the fact that they're also size 3. So their flame strike thing is not armor negating, but it never misses because it's an area of effect attack, so it's always going to nuke the entire square, and it deals 17 magic damage. So a single attack is going to clear out a square of ghosts. Additionally, the ghosts, or the fire elementals, have a fire shield, which deals 9 armor piercing damage on hit. So my ghosts that attack the fire elementals also stand a decent chance of dying. And then, of course, he just has these giant blobs of crossbowmen, which just wreck my guys. So yeah, my army's actually routed very quickly, but he actually spends a lot of gems killing relatively few ghosts. So, I mean, I lose the 30-odd guys here, including 9 crossbows, and he only loses 2 crossbows of his own, but on the other hand, he spent a lot of gems to do that. This army right here, with all of the gems that he had available, could have potentially even taken on my larger army, although that would have been a bit closer just because I would have had so many more crossbows firing back at his guys. Additionally, you can see here that his mages are all way over here in the back. He left an alley over here for these fire elementals, so I think that these guys are actually well placed. And then over here, these guys, because they're summoning air elementals, they don't need to worry about the alley thing. But they are all still grouped up with his crossbows. The fact they're casting air shield does make them protected, though, so they're at least, a little bit safer, but they're still not in a great position, I would say. And then, of course, there's the fact that this is just a very gem-expensive tactic, so I don't necessarily approve, but it's fine. I mean, it worked out okay. He just spent a lot of gems to do it. Here, I see that Marignon has nothing there, so I'm just going to take this. And I told Agartha in advance that I was doing this basically just hey, I'm going to be cutting off your avenue of invasion into Marignon, but I'm just going to leave it for you if you feel like attacking here. So I'm finally at least taking some province, but it's not the best. Here, these guys are retreating back because, we lost most of them. Some of the crossbows did retreat into here. They joined the blob with all the other guys. The rest are being brought back by the Centaurian to meet up with Etemu, who has claimed this province here. So Etemu in Dominion spawns these shades, which are nice because they deal some armor negating steel strength damage. When they steal strength, they basically weaken the dude that they're hitting, so pretty nice free spawn there. And then he's gonna, just group up with the additional ghosts that the Centaurian had brought up. And we're gonna group up over here and potentially fight Marignon in our Dominion. And because this guy is immortal, he can keep fighting, and I don't really need to worry about him too much. Because these guys have swamp survival, they can move 2 squares away, so I can move them down over here in case Marignon starts getting up over this way if I need to extract them. So I can continue recruiting these guys for now and continue having them research, and then I should be able to escape through here in case Marignon just does attack me. We found a magic site here, the Forest of Truffles. This is a nice little site, gives earth and nature income, but nothing super special about it. And I'm getting additional ghosts from my forts over here. So, I'm able to take this province over here with my Lemur Centaurian and his ghostly thing. This is basically finishing off the Indy province, which he'd already attacked into and failed to capture with his apparitions. Let's just take a look at this battle over here, because we get to see the Wraith Lord in action. So, His Sacrificial Chaff Squad is running in first as planned, while he is casting his nice little buff spells, and they even managed to paralyze a couple of these cavalry, so good job, Sacrificial guys. And now it is Etumu's turn, and these guys can't hurt him. They can't hit him, and then he is fearing them all and hitting them with his Baneblade, and yeah, everyone is dead. So the Baneblade, in addition to its damage, applies a decay effect on hit. Decaying units age extremely quickly, and if they weren't already routing, they would be at risk of dying of old age. Usually, though, when you're hitting some guys with a Baneblade Thug, you expect them to die from the hits instead. So a very minor effect there, but he's easily strong enough to at least beat up these indie guys. And then here, this is just the capture of this province after long last. And these guys are spreading their disease, but since it's only undead this time, we don't need to worry about it too much. One of these heavy cavalry is paralyzed, and they rout very quickly once they get into range of all these fear auras. And yeah, so stacking fear auras, doing work, getting rid of those guys there. We see Mictlan invade this throne and capture it, so no troubles there for him. And then here we see Abyssia attacking Ulm, so this is interesting. Apparently Ulm is a rush bait nation just because of how scary it's going to be later, and Abyssia is using his cap sacred units. So I don't actually like relying on these guys because they have very high encumbrance, they're very expensive, and you're basically just paying for the normal Abyssian stat line. And Abyssia also has these awesome non-sacred warbreads, but this particular Abyssia instead went for a very, very big bless. So he's taking E9, N9, which makes up for their encumbrance by giving them excellent reinvigoration, and it makes their already strong protection even stronger, so they're all the way up to 20. So with that and their tower shield, they're essentially immune to crossbows, and then of course their N9 to be even tankier. So he's hoping that these guys are going to use their fire aura to light people around them on fire, and use their incredible defensive stats to outlast any targets that they would fight. This is a very expensive bless, though, so you know that Abyssia had to tank his scales to get it, and because LA Abyssia is a strong blood nation, I definitely much prefer a scales build. But that's what he went with, and the early sacreds should at least be strong in the early game, which is going to be helpful in his war against Ulm. Here we get another nice event, so that's lots of gems, a whole big bounty of them. That's, what's that? 20 extra gems, very nice. And then here, that's just more Mictlanese expansion. So Mictlan expanded out kind of into a line up here, basically skirting around my enormous blob of territory. Abyssia has conquered this province from Ulm, so we know that Ulm is up this way, and yeah, given that Abyssia already owns this, we don't know exactly where Ulm is, but we know that Ulm has to be very small by this point, so it looks like Abyssia is pulling off a successful bless rush. In diplomatic news, Atlantis has publicly accepted a mercenary contract from Marignan, so we have actually already been at war. We just didn't really have any actual border at all to fight over. But now we do, so I'm attacking him. I mean, I know that he's going to attack me later, so I don't feel the need to wait for him to actually march an army up to my border before actually starting my own invasion. I see that these provinces are empty, I have my guys here with fear auras, and I figure that's enough to go ahead and try taking a fight. He's spamming apostasy just in case I run into one of his mage priests. I have a chance of stealing them, and I don't really want him to run into the fight, in spite of the fact that he's very strong and fat, and yeah, he's a morbidly obese undead, who would have thought, and has great stats and all that good stuff. I would much prefer him staying safe and retreating, in case all of my other fear aura guys die. Because presumably if he has something that's going to kill all of them, it's going to be his scary magic weapon heavy infantry, or some dust-to-dust casters or similar. So his being especially bold and awesome doesn't actually help him out. I am reviving an additional Limmer Acolyte, so I'm kind of basically splitting my summoning between the more efficient research guys and the potentially useful battle mages, because I anticipate a fight against Atlantis that will require mage support. I'm finally making an aggressive move over here, like I'd mentioned, and otherwise I'm continuing to just play passively and hope that Marignan fights into me so I can actually use this very expensive province defense investment that I've made. And that's the turn.